my name is Ugur. I work at API3, jack of all trades. For those of you who don't know API3 or have never heard of it, an Oracle project. There are many of those out there. I'm pretty sure you heard probably all of these names. And more specifically in the context of, let's say, DeFi, all of these in one way or another provide you with the same thing that all of you want. Please give me a price feed of, let's say, ETH/USD. Obviously, there are nuances to it. Everyone does it slightly differently. There's different levels of centralization, verifiability, and so on. But especially during a bull market, dApps tend to not care about that. They just want a certain price on a certain chain. And all of these projects, essentially doing the same thing, are competing on a beautiful chart, let's say, which is the DeFi Llama TVS chart. And that is essentially the value that all of these oracles, in one way or another, secure by providing price data to certain protocols. And I titled this slide, Meaningful Numbers Without Meaning. And there's a certain reason for that. We are somewhere at 9. And at January this year, we weren't even on this list. We had like 10 million or so. I think in the next couple of days, it's going to be at like 1.5 billion. But our revenue is unchanged. So it was 0, and it is 0, and it's still. And we could be securing 10 billion, and it's still going to remain 0. So the Oracle game, essentially, is a subsidized, what I like to call, mess. Nobody pays, but everybody somehow secures value. And the meta, so to speak, to make money as an Oracle project is the following. You climb the corporate ladder, aka DeFi Llama. You do that with all means necessary. You bribe people if you need to. You promise them tokens if they switch over to you. Once you have somehow attracted a couple of protocols and are somewhere there, up there, and you have made a name for yourself, you market that heavily. Like, look how much we're securing. And the fact that you bribe people to get there doesn't matter. The fact that you make 0 money also doesn't matter. And then you initiate phase 3, which is you just sell your token as heavily as you can, because you need to keep these feeds running. There's costs associated. But there's effectively no value capture mechanism for your token or your token holders. And effectively, that brings us to this situation. Nobody makes money. Every Oracle project somehow just dumps on you relentlessly. From a dApp perspective, especially during bull markets, nobody actually underlyingly very much so cares what they use. Everybody is kind of the same. Just give me a price. And business development is somehow reduced to promising people token. Like, if you switch over, we'll give you X amount of tokens worth, let's say, 100K. And this is a very unsustainable business model, or a completely unsustainable, essentially, situation. So if you want to build price feeds, let's say, there's no way you're going to make money with those price feeds, because some other project is going to come, they're going to create a token. With potentially point systems seem to be very attractive right now. Some point system, if you switch over, and they're going to heavily subsidize it, because that has been the name of the game for the last 4 to 5 years. Essentially, this is something we did not want to take part in, and also everybody kind of does the same thing. They do price feeds. So how do we do something slightly different? Like, how do we do something more, offer anything more than just simply a price? And that is why we essentially how we got to focusing on something called OEV. OEV stands for Oracle Extractable Value. You already got a little bit of an MEV introduction in the last presentation. So essentially, any value that can be extracted due to Oracle updates. And there's a lot of examples for this. I'll do the most basic one that everyone will most likely understand. Everyone here probably knows GMX. It's a derivatives platform, so you can go, let's say, 50x long on ETH/USD. The nuanced thing about it is it's not based on an order book. Like, there's no other side actively taking the trade against you. Like, it's LPs, but no essentially order book style. You take that trade on the basis of an Oracle price. Now, the Oracle price is on-chain, and when the Oracle updates, you see that in the mempool. So what you can do is you can monitor the mempool. Let's say ETH is at 3,000, and you see the next Oracle update coming in at 3,030. You place a trade, go 50x long right before the Oracle update, and essentially close your position right after. And that's guaranteed profit. There's nothing that anyone can do to stop you from this. And this has been going on for GMX in late 2020, where for 40 days, essentially, somebody just continuously opened the trade before an Oracle update, closed right after, and funneled off like $250,000 in potential profits. Just the most basic example of OEV. How big is the issue? This is a past number. This is closing in on well on $500 million that has been lost across numerous protocols. And it's lost in the sense that users of these protocols are bleeding this value away needlessly. And I'm going to, in this presentation, go heavily into lending protocols because it's the most easy to explain. So lending protocols are utilizing oracles to determine what your collateral potentially might be worth. When you then take a loan against that collateral, let's say you put an ETH in and take out 2,000 USDC, you essentially have a health factor. As long as this health factor is above 1, you're fine. You can just go on about your life, use that USDC, ape some more ETH. But the moment essentially ETH drops in value and your health factor drops below 1, you become liquidable, sorry. And what determines that is essentially the Oracle price change on-chain. And in order to essentially not risk getting into bad debt, these protocols are offering up a percentage of your collateral as a bonus to get anyone that wants to compete to liquidate you. And we say it's 5 to 10%. I recently also saw some insane numbers, 5 to 20% essentially of your collateral being offered up in case you get liquidated. Now, the bad thing about this is, or like, first of all, the flow, like if you get liquidated on a lending protocol, the flow is typically that the Oracle updates, your health factor drops below 1, and then searchers see that your position is now liquidable, and a bunch of other searchers might also see it, and they compete in block space auctions to have their transaction included first. So they bribe block builders, validators to have their transaction included above others, and then essentially you get liquidated, the searcher makes whatever is left after paying out the bribe. The interesting thing here, however, is that this competition for liquidations is quite significant. This is a quote from Monocero's report called the MEV book. And basically, on the right side over here, you see the largest liquidation on the Aave protocol this year in January for 4.2 million. You see, essentially, here how much was available as a reward for this liquidation. And you see below how much the searcher paid as a bribe in order to execute this, to walk away with $60.59, 95 cents. So essentially, this is a common occurrence. Protocols are offering up to $141,000 in rewards, but the searcher is willing to take $60 and use the rest to bribe his way to $60. And the funny thing about this entire concept that is happening on-chain is all of this is only possible because Oracle projects so far have decided not to take advantage of their privileged position. And what I mean by that is that the entity deciding what the price on-chain is could, in theory, simply bundle the Oracle update together with the liquidation. So all this of people seeing a position would never happen because together with the update, atomically, the position would be gone. So there's no chance for anyone else to catch that position, which obviously opens the question, if you have essentially this super entity with deciding the prices, why should anyone else compete? Like, you're going to have nobody else looking for liquidations, and now you end up in the situation where if the Oracle project ever fails to liquidate, there will be nobody else to liquidate, and you're kind of wrecked. So Oracle projects have collectively so far decided to ignore liquidating on lending markets for this potential danger. So they just update blindly. They don't care what potential OEV happens across whatever many protocols. So as a summary of how liquidations look right now, we have established that the fees are too damn high because we know that liquidators are giving away 99% of what they're being offered, and in theory, the oracles hold all the power. So how do we solve this? And we solved this, or are trying to solve it, there's very, very different approaches to it, by building an auction mechanism on top of the oracle. By simply moving the auctions, essentially, that currently already happen on the block space level, and making people compete for the oracle update that allows for the liquidation instead. And how we do that is essentially with what we call the OEV network. The OEV network is an oracle market and like a roll-up with an auction platform that is essentially hosted on a roll-up. Here you see essentially our general infrastructure. API 3 operates what we call first-party oracles. These are data businesses in the space, like CoinGecko. They operate the oracles directly themselves, and they maintain a feed on, for instance, Mantle like ETHUSD. This feed is slightly delayed by 15 seconds, and they also sell in real-time data without that 15-second delay on this roll-up. And now you, essentially, as a searcher, you can see it as an express highway. If you see a certain price that you like, where you can perform a certain action for, let's say liquidation, you can get the price immediately here for competing for it, go to the chain, update, and essentially front run. You don't have to wait for this to happen, for these 15-second delay to pass. You can just essentially scoop in and get the potential liquidation, and whatever you paid for it here is enshrined in the meta transaction that we give you, and you pay the dApp in the process to do that. So on this rollup, there's essentially an auction ran for each data feed on each chain for each dApp. So essentially, there's Mantle USD for Init Capital, which is a dApp on Mantle. You could have ETHUSD for Compound on Arbitrum. You could have BNB USD for Venus on BNB chain. And the searchers essentially can place bids. Let's say they pre-calculate there's a massive position that is liquidable at 3,000 ETH. It gives me a reward of $1 million. I'm bidding 900K. The moment the oracles essentially hit 900K, the answer is posted here. You can take that answer, and that answer enshrined has essentially how much did you bid, which chain did you win on, which dApp did you win on, and all of the oracle answers that you need in order to update the data feed. And you can essentially bundle this together directly with your liquidation. The dApp gets paid, you get the remaining reward, and the position is liquidated. And what then happens is essentially that these 141,477 that currently are used as a bribe to effectively, or like the cost rather here, to pay validators is now returned to the dApp. So that's a massive amount of money that you now have at your disposal. And what do you do with that? And that is essentially the core of the essence of this presentation. I just needed to explain a lot of how that works. So you have millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions now coming in. Like, what can you do? By simply changing an oracle, you essentially now make a lot of more money, which allows lending protocols to potentially customize themselves to become, let's say, more advantageous in certain areas. One potential solution is, I'm pretty sure you all are aware of Compound Finance. Compound is essentially a lending protocol, and they hand out essentially comp tokens as a liquidity mining reward for you to, for instance, lend them your ETH. And from inception to date, Compound has, quote unquote, lost or paid out 90 million in liquidation bonuses. So 90 million users have been overcharged by 90 million since inception. If you actually essentially got all of that back, essentially what I've written here, if Compound recovered the OEV and bought comp tokens at the end of each month since inception, you would have now an additional roughly 700,000 comp. The daily issuance of Compound is currently 1,652 tokens. So essentially, if we keep that number up, they could keep their liquidity mining program, which will essentially last maybe for 2 more years or so, running for another 1 year or so. Another interesting idea is, this I think is my old slide, sorry for that, but you could essentially take OEV from liquidated borrowers and offer it to borrowers that are more reasonable. So what happens is that if somebody goes degen, let's say 5x long on Aave and actually gets liquidated, and you now have this new money that you distribute among the other borrowers, you drop their costs to potentially near zero, and you having the costs at essentially near zero will attract other borrowers, and all of this will create a positive flywheel where lenders are just essentially making a lot of money. The third thing that people could potentially do is token burns. Just showing this at the example of Venus, also a lending market on BNB chain. From inception to date, Venus has lost roughly 70 million to OEV. If they recovered that every single day and at the end of every single day bought their own token, XVS, they could have burned roughly 4,600,000 tokens. That is essentially 15% of the total supply. And the current circulating supply would be down by like roughly 30%. So there's various different ways how lending protocols could use that money that is now coming in. They could make their own token more valuable. They could make the markets that they're offering more valuable. They could keep liquidity mining programs running for longer. And the fourth way that I actually don't have on the slides here is you could also just give it back to the user that was liquidated and drive the cost down immensely. So why would you use a lending protocol that charges you a 20% penalty if there's one that charges you less than 1%? And that is essentially the summary of this presentation. It was a bit quicker, made some time up from before. If you have any questions, shoot. Our feeds are live on like over 25 networks right now, and the auction platform is set to launch imminently. It's already operational, and liquidations are already being performed on most of our customers through that. It's just not publicly announced yet. Nope.
Great. Thank you for the lovely presentation. We have time for questions. So we'll start off here in the front.
Thank you for the talk. Could you explain maybe a bit more? So you mentioned that the oracles can technically exploit their privileged position, but they just decided not to do that. And my thought is, OK, if I'm an oracle and I want to bundle my oracle update with a transaction that exploits this like market inefficiency, how do I ensure atomicity of these two transactions? Because in the end of the day, they will be included in a block by some builder or by some like validator or whatever you call them. And it's up for them eventually to maybe unbundle my transaction and replace my transaction with their own transaction. It's not up to me to construct a block, right?
Yeah, but theoretically, essentially, the oracle can still limit who is allowed to update that specific feed and what action follows it. So essentially, if you only allow the first action to happen after the second one, there's like no way for anyone else to take advantage of that. In our system specifically, for instance, if we sell the rights, the right to update is attached to a certain address that is allowed to do that. So that person essentially then bundles it together with like the Oracle update together. Only they are allowed to update, and after that follows the liquidation, which means that if you essentially try to split the first one like apart, like you can't actually do the second one because the first one has to go through for the second one to go through.
I'm not sure if Wittmann is there, but...
Okay. Yeah. We can have a chat after. Just come to my booth.
Great. Yeah, next over here on the left.
In your example with the fast highway and the 15-second delay for Mantle, what is the incentive for the layer 2 in this case to agree to that 15-second delay, or is there some incentive?
It's not something that the layer 2 decides. Like the Oracle nodes together essentially just imagine it as two endpoints. One is selling the instantaneous data, and one is selling the 30 seconds delayed data, similar to some, let's say, stock API providers. Some have like these 15-minute delay regulatorily that they can't sell you real-time data, but they can sell you 15-minute delayed data. And similarly here, you can essentially see it. The regular ETH-USD feed is maintained with a 15-second delay, but you can have instant data whenever you want over the rollup and just pull it into the chain whenever it is beneficial for you to do so. So like, it is nothing that the chain essentially can decide, but obviously the chains are incentivized to do this with us because we're essentially keeping, first of all, TVL on their chain. The liquidation bonuses are typically just leaving the chain. If you pay out, let's say, 100K as a bonus because you liquidated someone, rarely does that stay within the ecosystem. You essentially took away TVL from a potential dApp. All chains are competing for potential value to climb up, again, the DeFi Llama corporate ladder. And here, the chain is incentivized because money just stays with the dApp. And essentially, the dApp is incentivized because they climbed the corporate ladder, and so on, and so on.
Great. Highly engaged audience. We have, yeah.
I was just wondering, how do you guys bootstrap the searcher market for backrunning the liquidations? Yeah.
That is a very good question. I think that is the most challenging part with any system. It's also when people typically say like, every dApp can just run their own auctions, this is the first problem that they arise to, like how do you actually get searchers? And we're in touch with a lot of them, essentially incentivizing them through agreements with us to get it bootstrapped. And then the idea is that when it grows large enough, similar to what happens on mainnet, you will actually have natural competition appearing. You already see dApps making these sorts of deals on their own. I believe like Angle is a good example. They have a private deal with, I think it was Propeller Heads. So dApps are already essentially pulling in searcher teams themselves and making deals with them. So initially to bootstrap, we will have deals with a lot of searcher teams, making sure that there are sufficient liquidations. And some of these protocols that we work together with already have established deals that are just going to essentially use this new highway to make use of the privileged position and flow money back to them.
OK. With that, thank you very much. We'll take 1 minute, but stay in your seats. So, thank you.